Sunum orada var mı? Sunum açık mı şu an? Ha, tamam yansın. Tamam. Tamam, ben buradan yapıyorum inşallah.
Şu an başlayabilirsiniz.
Tamam.
Şu anda eğlenelim. Tamam. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. On the behalf of the Marmara University Institute of Islamic Economics and Finance, I welcome all of you. First of all, I have to inform that director of the institute, Professor Dr. Ertuğrul Boylukan's relative passed away. This is the reason he couldn't attend it today. We welcome all of you also. Inshallah, today's the institute's first seminar, we will start with Ahmet Faruk Aysan. He got his bachelor degree from Bosphorus University, then he got the master and PhD from University of Maryland. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. Then he served Istanbul City University, and right now he is a faculty member at the Hamad University in Qatar, and he is the well-known scholar in Islamic finance. Inshallah, he will give a good lecture for us, and this lecture will be beneficial for us and for the who study Islamic finance. And
Thank
the
you.
floor is yours.
Thank you, Şakir Hocam. It's a great pleasure to be here after a while. I would like to first thank for the very kind invitation to all the faculty members, to Zeynel Abidin Hoca, Murat Hoca, Ertuğrul Hoca, Şakir Hoca, to all the members. So it's a great pleasure to be here. I used to be coming here for PhD Master Thesis Defenses for the Economics Department. Suud Hoca, Rahmetullahi Alayh, and also Fatma Hoja was here and other faculty members. So it has been a while. I realized that I haven't been here. So it is good to remember those days also. And also it's good to see a big change at Marmara University. Even this building was not around. I attended one of the master thesis defenses here. It was a European Institute, I guess. There was one European Institute, I guess, in here. So thank you very much again for inviting me. It's a great privilege to be here in the summer, and thank you for coming in the summer. I'm sure you were all busy, and mashallah, I see there are many students from different countries. So it is a big richness for the MÜİSEF and for the Marmara University and for Turkey. So it's great to be here in that regard as well. I put a very kind of a challenging title, so it's more of a discussion paper, I would say. I have been thinking about the future studies more in the last couple of years because I get older. That is the main reason, because I get bored with the usual stuff. I am always into new topics. So I always consider the academia as kind of an intellectual endeavor. So we need to learn new stuff. And while I'm doing my regular, let's say, topics, I'm also quite interested in the future studies. Because increasingly more, social sciences are also under threats. We are considered to be, as being an economist, finance people, or even in any social sciences, there is an approach that it is as if we are doing some sort of a post-fact analysis. Things happens, and then we run some regressions, we look at the data, and from that, our assumption is the world will continue as it is, and whatever we found out will be helpful for the future. So in a sense, we are doing some future studies, but with the assumption that the world will repeat itself. But it's not like that anymore, right? It is more of a Karl-Popper's world where the future becomes much more difficult to predict. And that's why there is much more anxiety. If we can show our slides, probably in the meantime, also I can, I put some of the slides there as well. So it is much more challenging right now, and it is much more needed to try to understand how the world is changing. Okay. Oh. Far in the history. Bunun başı var değil mi? Ha, tamam. Okay. Okay, it's starting from here. So that's why I would like to focus more on the future studies, and I believe this is also the future for the social sciences, because increasingly more social sciences are becoming more irrelevant. when you look at the American universities, for example, many of the history departments are closing down. There is much less demand globally, not just in Turkey. You know, in Turkey, there is much less demand for economics and management related fields. But this is not the case just for Turkey. It's a global trend. So more data science related fields are rising, or some kind of a more eclectic form of disciplines are coming up. All right, so people are not becoming unemployed, but there are different sets of skills required, which is good because even the university education system has been mostly established after the Second World War, and we have different disciplines and so on. Even the disciplines in social science are quite a new thing anyway. Even the social sciences by itself is quite new, right, in the world history. But especially when we divide the disciplines like sociology, psychology, they're relatively new. They are not even older than 100 years almost, right? Economics is one of the oldest disciplines in social sciences, if you consider. But for the future, first of all those disciplines seem to be more interdisciplinary, and there are different sets of skills needed. Especially the sets of skills are like data science related skills are gaining more importance, and technology is becoming much more influential in our disciplines. And the ChatGPT is a very vibrant example for that. All of a sudden, even the way how we start writing our papers, how we give the assignments to the students are changing. So, but even before that, in the past, we used to think that, okay, if we choose a certain discipline or certain occupation, or if we deal with something, that topic will remain with us for a long period of time. But right now, the change in the history seems to be taking place much faster, and we have to be ready for this. So there are all these concepts like future readiness, AI readiness. This sort of readiness concept is becoming more and more important. And I believe we have to follow the similar direction because Islamic finance is not separate from finance or economics, right? Islamic finance and economy, without knowing economics and finance, it is difficult to interpret certain things in Islamic finance. So one way or another, we are being affected by what happens in the conventional economics and finance, what happens in the real world. We are not in kind of in a vacuum, living in an ivory tower, and we make some comments about what is right, what is wrong, or what it should be. So the world is becoming less like this, and it's becoming much more practical, and the world is changing. So this is my main motivation. And in this presentation, I have three parts. One is whether we can develop a methodology to predict future. And we know, especially in economics, or let me finish for this three sides of presentation. I have been thinking about this presentation for a while. Sometimes it's good to put the title and then to think about what to say. And then I have been doing it for the last couple of days. The first part, I would like to just open the floor for how we can think about the future more, which we haven't done for social sciences mostly. Because in social sciences, we know we run some regressions, and then there are some results, and then that's it. I mean, it's something that we know. But methodologically, we don't know how to predict the future, really. There are some econometric models, but these econometric models are mainly just to predict tomorrow, in a sense. It's a very short-sighted future predictions that we do. But we don't do really big predictions about what happens 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So this is something that as social sciences, we have to be in the game. Because if you look at the more recent names, for example, who became popular, they are mostly talking about the future. Even the Elon Musk is a good figure, right? I mean, most of the younger generation is one way or the other is following Elon Musk, and he is not actually talking about today. He's talking about the future. Even the cars that he produced or SpaceX that he one way or the other produced is still in ideas, pretty much. And there are much far implications for the future than today. And we don't have that names, this sort of names in the Muslim world. This is something also we need to think about. So in the first part, I would like to open up the floor, how, as an economist, as finance people, how we can make predictions not just the predictions about the asset prices and so on, like that we do in economics and finance, because this is something we know pretty much. It's not like nowcasting sort of models. And we have a good knowledge about it. But when it goes like what happens 5 years, 10 years from now, we have a quite a limited knowledge. And the knowledge that we have from the earlier is like in development studies, right? The idea is that it's as if we know certain things and we can predict the growth models. But even there are problems. So we are not even good at benefiting from the development models and predicting future, because the technology is oftentimes is not very much incorporated in the growth and development models. Now they are being started to be incorporated, but even it is relatively. Evet, hocam hoş geldiniz. Buyurun buyurun. Var hocam, bu şurada bir yer var. Evet. Hocam hoş geldiniz. So even this growth and development models are very much affected by the technological changes, and even the way that we start modeling the growth models are changing. I was in Ankara on Monday, for example. Daran Hocamoğlu is quite a leading figure in growth models, and just now actually relatively they are incorporating automations, the technological change. And it's a big topic, but when you look at the recent papers, they are just like 5 years old or so. I mean, he has done this sort of work 10 years ago as well. But all these AI developments, Industry 4.0 and so on, are not necessarily well modeled, even in economics. So the first part is that's why and these are anyway theory models, by the way. Even in theory, still oftentimes something happens and then we try to write a theory about it. It doesn't mean that it is good enough to predict the future. Still, there are problems there. But I believe it will be a very important trend to predict the future in this sense. But we need to have some sort of a consistent methodology. And in the first part, I put forward my ideas how we can methodologically predict the future better. This is one thing. And in the second part of the presentation, how Islamic finance will be affected by the studies, how the Islamic finance is likely to be evolving, what happens. And this is the second part. And the third part is going to be concluding with a more positive approach, where I will try to assess using ChatGPT how the Islamic finance, and my claim in the third part will be, we wrote one paper on this and I put this into this presentation. My claim is that over the last 50 years, when we look at the different developments in the Muslim world, in social sciences, in social and cultural side, or in political side, or in economics, our claim is that in economics and finance, we have a much better success story than the other fields. Islamic finance, there are lots of criticism about Islamic finance, about convergence, for example, that Islamic finance is converging with the conventional side, and it's becoming not much different from the other conventional side. But we have a different approach. We have a more positive approach. Even though half of the glass is empty, still the half is full. And if there is anything that we have achieved over the last 50 years in the Muslim world, certainly Islamic finance is a good example. And then we use some examples from ChatGPT results for this. So this is the 3 parts of my presentation that I'm planning to do. So let me start with some observations. First of all, there are some technological changes, whether we like it or not, but they seem to be not just kind of just a change. It seems to be much more transformational changes. And the AI applications like the ChatGPT is a good example for that. And in the discipline, we observe this, right? Right now, many of the analysis that we used to be doing, and it used to be part of the PhD thesis and so on, right now it could be done very quickly. at least the ChatGPT sort of programs will be increasingly used to guide our ideas and also to automate the things, even in academia. Right now, there is a concurrent discussion about automation. For example, that's why Daron Cemoğlu's presentation was on automation. He's a leading figure in the growth models, and his paper was on automation. And it's a relatively new paper. Imagine this is something that they are also responding. He published in AER journal, but automation is still we don't really know. We know, and there are far-reaching implications. Like it has an implications for migration. For some, Industry 4.0 is very much pushed by the Germans, and the reason is not necessarily that they are very fond of technology. Actually, philosophically, they are against the technology. All these philosophers are not necessarily fond of technology, but still, because of the aging population, instead of migration, they see the Industry 4.0 as a solution, right? When we have the automation, when we have the AI tools, even the non-routine jobs would be done by the robots, and the robots will be replacing the humans. And this has also implications even for the wars right now. Right now, for example, the wars are not necessarily done by the humans. It is done by the drones. And these drones probably are run by the people, but oftentimes they are run on their own through some AI tools. And on the finance, we see all sorts of development of fintech. And in the fintech, there is a similar thing happening. In the past, we used to have, even now, I shouldn't say in the past, but the banking is quite a gross field, right? There are depositors, there are creditors, and this is mainly what the banks are doing. And most of the financial transactions are about lending and borrowing, right? But without making much difference from individual to individual. But right now, instead of banks, we have wealth management companies rising, right? In all parts of the world, not just in Turkey, but in all parts of the world. Even with a small amount of assets, you can have option to invest in different assets globally. I mean, even in Turkey, I mean, many people are buying the assets of Tesla, other things. And in the past, it used to be for the very big corporations, very rich, but right now the regular individuals are reaching these tools. And the fintech, in a sense, is individualizing the finance. And this is a big thing, which is somewhat also quite related with Islamic finance, because Islamic finance used to be more aligned with the banking, and because it was the game in the town, but the game in the town is changing. So the fintech companies will be increasingly more and more important as firms. And also even the landscape is changing. For example, one of the research that I'm doing is on central bank digital currencies. And I have been working on cryptocurrencies. At that time, this is about 7 years ago. It was first in Şehir. We were the first one organizing the cryptocurrency conference. And Mustafa Özel Hoca was one of the speakers, I remember. And at that time, it was not necessarily considered to be an academic topic, right? It was kind of the young generation are dealing with it. But it is about the essence of money, that we learn a lot from the cryptocurrencies. Now, the central banks are making the similar discussions through the central bank digital currencies. So, but these are again coming from the technological changes. Everything is recorded in blockchain or without blockchain. But now the technology is even changing the nature of money. We don't need to print money. Right now, the monies are not anymore in papers. Even it is not in the accounts. It is more of a record-based money coming up. And this is a transformational change because the landscape is changing. So right now, for example, in the past, there is this fractional reserve system, right? Many of the Islamic finance people used to be criticizing, especially after 2008 crisis. Asad Zaman, for example, has some papers on this, that the reason why we have bank failures, the reason why we have some sort of inequality in distribution of assets and so on, is about the banking system. But right now with the CBDCs, even you don't have to do the fractional reserve system. You can have tell the bank, or the central bank can allocate the loans directly without having any need for the banks or any fintech companies. And this is a technological change, which we cannot even imagine 10 years ago. or we can probably imagine 10 years ago, because this CBDC research started to be taking place in BIS for about 10 years ago. I do remember it when I was at the central bank. Our governor at that time, Erdem Başçı, thanks to him, he was talking about this blockchain and the CBDCs. It was at the agenda because of the central bankers, because the cryptocurrencies come up because of the technology, and even the central banks are feeling the pressure. Why I'm saying this? All these developments used to be taking place probably in the past in every 100 years or something. But right now, this cryptocurrencies thing, for example, happened in the last 10 years at most. I mean, it came out in 2009 with Satoshi Nakamoto and so on, but still it's relatively new. And at that time, initially, that's why I said it was like a joke, but now it's something real. All the central banks right now are working on central bank digital currencies. BIS has lots of innovation hubs in different parts of the world. Last April, we organized a workshop on CBDCs in Istanbul. Bariya Hengrin is one of the keynote speakers. So all, and the regional central banks have been represented all. This shows that central bankers, all the financial sector is quite aware that there's a big change in the landscape. And this will affect all the, how the fintech applications are taking place. Why I'm saying this, I'm just trying to put my observation up. The world will not be the same as, probably it was already changing all the time, certainly. I mean, change is part of the life. But apparently the change is taking place much faster. Even I mean, the topic that I start working on, banking, for example, is now kind of obsolete. I mean, still, we get citations, and that's not bad. But in terms of the interest, regular banking topics are becoming less important, but instead all these new topics, the cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, fintech topics are becoming more and more important. Even in academia, things are changing much faster than it used to be. Because I remember, for example, if you work on one topic throughout of your lifetime, it will be enough. Even now, probably it is enough, but many of my friends who used to be working on banking right now are working on sustainability, fintech. They try to accommodate also to these changes. Another example, I used to hate the futuristic movies. I mean, I was more of a romantic guy that liked to watch the romantic movies rather than the futuristic movies. But because of my age, probably, I started liking the futuristic movies, like the Dune, for example. It's one of the which I believe Islamic finance, we should show it in Islamic finance and we should discuss. Or the people in, even some of the terminology, like usul, some of the names, how they are attributing. And this novel has been written, I guess, in 1965. It's a futuristic movie, and it becomes much more real right now in terms of sustainability, in climate change, how the water will be scarce, and how the society is going to be organized, or how it might be organized. We might have a saver, and the saver might. So I will strongly recommend. And there are this sort of movies. It's not just about related with AI. Most of them are not necessarily giving very positive messages, but it even increases the anxiety among us right now, because regardless of in which sector you are in, there is no guarantee that 10 years, 20 years from now, your job will be secure if you are not a real estate developer in Turkey. So it's always just, but even the bankers, right? In the past, since 2000s, still the number of employees in Turkey working in the banking industry is declining. The country is growing and so on, but the banks are closing down their branches. Instead, there are now digital banks are started to be introduced. Most of the things are done not necessarily by hand, but they're much more complex. But in any case, this all increases the anxiety among the people, and we would like to predict the future more and more. And this is a very difficult job to predict the future because this is something that we don't know much. Gidiyor mu acaba? Tamam. Okay. Okay. So I name this as kind of resilience and innovation is taking place. I like to continue to change literature, like in sociology, people used to use this. I mean, there are certain things which seem to be not changing. There is some continuity, but at the same time, there are changes in all parts of our life. There is much more concern about employment. There is much more concern about the growth. Even about the financial stability, right? After COVID-19, all the literature start turning into resilience. There's a huge literature came up after the COVID-19. Okay, we might have some sort of tail risks, some unexpected that might happen, but at that time, are we resilient? Are we going to be able to maintain one way or another? And there are different layers of uncertainty, especially in the labor market at the macro level, more macro level, where people are concerned about their employment, whether their jobs will be stolen by the AI, some robots, automation. This is a big issue. And also it even affects the competitiveness of the countries, right? Even between China and US, one of the main discussion is not about the trade wars like the Trump is trying to portray. Right now, the main issue is like microchips exports. The Chinese cannot buy microchips from NVIDIA, right? This company, because there are certain, even recently they put a ban to UAE to sell microchips to China and Russia. This becomes more of a strategic goods. These are technological goods, but the free market idea is not even working there. When you don't have the access to technology, you have to develop your technology, and US is trying to gain time because these microchips are used for processing the AI data or storing the AI data. And right now, US has an upper hand, and they are trying to at least gain time, because sooner or later China will catch up. But at least in the meantime, they are trying to catch up. And that's why even for the countries, the competitiveness is becoming not necessarily about the strategic trade policies, but it becomes more of a strategic technology policies, let's say, how to attract talented people, how to invest. One good example is the founder of OpenAI, what was his name? Sam Altman. Sam Altman is trying to raise $7 trillion, not for the program of ChatGPT, but to produce microchips to process this data faster, right? And it consumes lots of energy. There are lots of implications, but once you do that, and if you process the data better, you have the chance to you have a big competitive advantage in many of the products, not just in international competitiveness. So at the more micro level, at the more individual level, I mean, we start having more discussion about what is human. I mean, all this transhumanists, for example, are becoming more vocal because of these changes, right? Because there is much more discussion about what is human, how it is defined, and so on. And they are relating with the computers, and then they try to define the humans and so on. I mean, this is also more at the individual level. Even this more existentialist questions seem to be asked more. So in that sense, studying the future becomes more vital. Because these are the topics, all the topics that I mentioned to you is not necessarily that something that you can get some clue, but it is not something happened in the past. I mean, there are some strategic trade wars, some strategic trade policies and so on, but these are relatively a different world, right? It's not necessarily technology driven, and this technology is not necessarily industrial sort of production. This is a different type of change. So that's why the past is not necessarily helping us. So, but we need to give some insights to the younger generation, right, about the future, such that they can plan accordingly. And over there, the scientists or the let's say people from the social sciences are not necessarily leading, right? The entrepreneurs, right, like I mentioned, like Sam Altman, Elon Musk, sort of people seem to be ahead of the game, and the people are much more following them than the academics. This is our mistake, one way or other. Because not our mistake, but we are methodologically not prepared for this. So in this part, I am trying to discuss that we can develop some methodologies for this. And I'm not inventing this. I'm probably inventing this in economics and finance, because economics and finance people are not necessarily very proactive people. We are relatively more conservative as compared to probably other social sciences, because we are more deductive people, right? We have some theories and so on. This is how our education is taking place. So in that sense, I believe that economics and finance people are much more conservative people in their approach to social sciences. I believe management people are much more agile, and that's why, for example, there's a group called desirable futures. And actually, one of the leading figures in this group is our friend Ali Gümüşay. Professor Ali Gümüşay is from LMU in Munich, right? He used to be a visiting student at Istanbul University. That's where I met with him. And they try to predict the future from a management side, how the things will change, how the technology will change the landscape. But at the same time, predicting the future by itself contain designing the future, because this is something that happens, right? This is not necessarily objective. So you can have an intervention. So that's why they name it like a desirable future. So we don't just predict, but we try to design the future in a way that it will be much more desirable with our ethical values, with our worldview and so on. So by predicting the future, as if we are also trying to impact the future, right? And all this impact research and so on is also part of this, and this right now more accepted. And we don't have to be necessarily objective in our analysis. I mean, we can have a point of view and we can push for it in social science. At least this used to be more marginal, but it is becoming much more mainstream right now. But still, even that methodologically, how we can do this is a big question, because how are we going to run regressions, right? What sort of literature we are going to be benefiting? Probably it will be much more interdisciplinary, right? Especially this evolutionary game theory people, when you look at them, I mean, they are mainly benefiting from biology. They are not really game theorists. All their data is pretty much from biology data. One of my friends from Singapore sent me a paper which is going to be presented in the economics department, and it's all about biology. But they are benefiting from the data from biology, and they have implications about the AI, how it might evolve. And this is kind of actually a futuristic study, because this is what I'm claiming. We can still reduce the post-fact analysis and increase the pre-fact analysis by finding some similarities. And we have one nice paper on this. I mean, initially we didn't intend to do this, but we have one survival of the fittest paper, which has been published by Singapore Economic Review. When I was at Share, we have one student, master student, and we have also one undergrad student in that paper. And I'm just giving this as an example, how we can predict the future. My argument is that we can find something similar, which might take place in the future today, but in a different market, right? Even Islamic finance is a good example for that, by the way. When we have dual banking system, having an Islamic finance along with the conventional finance is actually good for the conventional finance. Why? Some of the policy analysis that we do, if it is just conventional finance, we don't have any variation. But for some reason, Islamic finance is a bit different from some respects. And then we can analyze how the Islamic finance customers are responding to certain shocks or certain policy changes. And from that, we can have implications for the conventional finance. For example, from our earlier work, we have shown in several articles, Islamic bank depositors are much more responsive. They are much more rational than the conventional bank's customers. So this is one of our most reputed papers, I mean, most reputable papers we publish in Journal of Comparative Economics, Journal of Financial Stability. What we have found out, Islamic bank customers and the conventional bank customers are different, and Islamic bank customers are even smarter and more rational in their allocation of their deposits. It's a long paper, but just this is the main conclusion. But this is good. It shows that actually, on the one side, you can interpret the result like that, or you can interpret that conventional bank depositors are actually captive of the conventional banks. So since they don't have options and they don't search enough, they don't know their alternatives. But it is less so for the Islamic banks, because most of the Islamic banks customers have also their accounts in the conventional banks, they have to be much more alert. Probably they are not being rewarded for their deposits. So whenever there is some macroeconomic shocks and so on, they have to be much more alert to save themselves anyway. So that was our main motivation. But why I'm saying this, when you have a dual banking system, it might help the conventional sector, or it might help the policymakers to formulate policies. Or another example from our papers, again, when we look at the loans market, we see that the Islamic banks are extending more loans to SMEs as compared to conventional banks. This is a big advantage for the policymakers. Why? Because imagine like in COVID-19 periods, your main purpose is to save the SMEs because they are generating more employment. You don't necessarily want to protect the big corporations because they are relatively more stable, more secure, and so on, because of their access to capital and so on. And that's why we might want to protect the SMEs, and the Islamic banks might help in this direction. So during the time of COVID-19, probably you even wanted to help the Islamic banks more than the conventional banks because they have a more direct relationship with the SME customers. And we have shown this with Nurullah and Mehmet in our paper, which gets the data from Islamic Chamber of Commerce. But the more probably apparent example is our survival of the fittest paper. What we have done throughout the world, there are small countries like Bosnia, like some small countries, but they still have their stock exchanges, or even Qatar. I mean, there are not too many firms in the market, in the stock market, but still they are operating. And what is the main reason? They consider having a stock market as a form of representation of the sovereignty. If I am a country, I should have my flag, I should have my stock market. It's part. If they are all traded in Nasdaq or somewhere in the bigger stock markets, probably it will be much more efficient. There will be more liquidity. There will be overall more capital. Because still, when you fragmented the markets from one stock market to another, still there are some inefficiencies. That's why many of the stock markets, to get rid of this, they are having some sort of cross-listing of the firms. For example, Turkcell is cross-listed in Turkey and also in Nasdaq. It used to, I don't know right now whether it's the case. Or in Saudi Arabia, they are cross-listing the companies in the Gulf region, not necessarily just the companies in the Gulf. Why? Because there is an inefficiency. But what we found out in the cryptocurrency market, we don't have this national sovereignty issue because the cryptocurrency market is quite universal. That's why if there is any exchange, it is not necessarily specific to a country, right? Even now, for example, even for Paribu, for BTC Türk, you can be living, you don't necessarily be living in Turkey. You can be living in another countries as long as you put your money into the system, which is not necessarily difficult, right? Even you might be living in UK, and then you will transfer the money to the accounts of this exchanges, and then once you are in the cryptocurrencies, you can transfer your money all over the world. You can put your money to the wallet, and then you can get your money in Singapore, other places. And that's why there are lots of cryptocurrency exchanges throughout the world. And we asked the question, if the only difference between the cryptocurrency exchanges and the national stock market exchanges is their sovereignty. One is the government is controlled. There are states, and the other one, there are no states. And our argument is that if we don't have the states, if this stock exchanges start, or if the sovereigns, if the governments allow their stock markets to merge with the other stock markets or to have cross-listing, what happens to the relatively smaller stock exchanges? So we analyze the cryptocurrency stock exchanges, and we say that the best stock markets in cryptocurrencies will attract all the other stocks anyway. And the Binance is a very good example for this. And how we have done this, all of these cryptocurrency exchanges have their own currencies. And then we look at their currencies. And when we were doing this analysis, I guess the Binance was like $5 or so as a coin. Now it is $700. We didn't buy the Binance at that time. This is our thing. We were approaching the issue from an academic perspective. Otherwise, we could have been quite rich by now. But this is an example, kind of for future studies. If in the future, if we imagine like a more stateless environment, which is likely to happen with CBDCs, for example, because CBDCs, on the one hand, is controlling your money, everything will be monitored. That's why Republicans are against it. Like that's why Trump is saying that we will never allow for CBDCs, and this is a big issue in US, for the election. And the Republicans are more liberal people, and then they don't want to be monitored, so they don't want the CBDCs to be there. But it will come, whether they like it or not, because it's a technology other countries will use. But the good thing is that all the other countries will have their CBDCs, and the ordinary people, will put some of their money in the Turkish CBDC, some of the money will be in the Argentinian CBDC, most of it will be probably US CBDC, and so on. This dollarization will be more, or this kind of a strong currency denomination will be even more of a case in the CBDCs. And this is also that's why many of the things which happen in the cryptocurrency market will help us what might happen when the countries start introducing CBDCs. Why I gave this example, we should do this sort of methodological contribution. It is not necessarily that we are not like future tellers. We have medium Memiş and others. We don't have such skills, but at least we can have more educated methodology about what might happen in the future, even for AI, for labor, and so on. This is just an example that we can do. And then again, the emphasis is that even we design this, we can put some normative judgments there. Okay, that's why I believe what people are doing in management field about the desirable futures. Okay, we predict the future, but at the same time we design the future sort of approach. We should adopt this more in economics and finance. And but this is a very difficult thing. And then I try to explain in here how we can do this. These are more argumentative, and I believe it will be very difficult to form a theory. That's why management people are luckier there, because they can form their theories for each and every paper. This is allowed to them. But for us, we are more inductive. We use the theories and then we try to make predictions, which is, I believe, quite playing a very limited, or making economics and finance people in a difficult position. But in any case, we have to indulge in this research, because more and more futuristic movies are watched by the younger generation. Even this Homo Deus, right? The Yuval Harari book. I mean, it's even a bestseller in Turkey. Imagine all these discussions and so on. And then my approach is that Homo sapiens has been written not to be able to write about Homo Deus. They are also probably making us ready for the future. And Yuval Harari is thinking that the human species, he is a more transhumanist anyway.
We have now Homo debitus.
What is it, hocam?
Homo debitus.
Debitus. Homo debitus. Yes. But globally this.
Data support.
Yes. But in any case, this is also a challenge for us, because as Islamic finance people, the names that I gave, why I think it's important, Islamic finance is becoming more and more irrelevant for the younger generation, right? I mean, if you compare it about 10, 20 years ago, there were more excitement that Islamic finance is new and so on. Let's do the banking in an Islamic way. Even after 2008 crisis, this was the jargon. But right now, everybody is thinking that, okay, the AI is coming, probably my job is under jeopardy, or what will happen to my kids and so on. And then we should be able to say something there. Otherwise, these guys will run the game. Yuval Harari will be invited to the World Economic Forum, and then they will design, and their books will be bestseller. And I believe there should be more to be done there. So, and another observation we have, there are some data showing that Islamic finance is at the plateau, where number of publications seem to be more stable in the last 2 years. Number of citations become more stable. So the point is that Islamic finance, the momentum that Islamic finance received after 2008 crisis, is not necessarily there, like globally. Certainly from countries, for example, in Indonesia, Islamic finance share is still increasing. In Turkey, the share is still increasing, but still like 8-9%, not necessarily. There's not a global push now that much, like we observed after 2008 crisis. This should be something that we should be also concerned, because I always believe that even the Islamic finance is not just in Rahmetullah Sabri Orman Hoca used to be saying this. I remember he said it in one of his İlkler or İKAM events. I mean, this is not because of our success the Islamic finance came here. Allah has brought us here. Hocam, I don't know whether you were there, but really certain things which is not necessarily because of our efforts, but because the global environment has changed. You know, especially 2008 crisis is an important one. There's an increasing attention globally for Islamic finance. But we don't have such an attention right now. Everybody is more concerned about the technology, about the fintech, and the implication of this overall technology, the automation, fintech, how the banking, money, and so on, even how our behaviors in the workspace are changing, like decentralized autonomous organization sort of thing. All those things are new concepts, and Islamic finance and economy is not necessarily at the center. Even the ethics is discussed not with reference to the religions, but with reference to the technology, even, right? So that's why we have to be aware of this, and we have to think about it. So we need to have even more future thinking and future studies in Islamic finance. And one thing I believe I consider this as a positive thing. I have been saying this for a while. Before sustainable finance, before sustainable discussion, there was an Islamic economics, right? We have to be proud of this, because right now the mainstream economics and finance, instead of having just one determinant of success like growth or price, profit, and so on, now they also look at some non-price dimensions, like how much we are polluting the environment, how much this product is sustainable. This is actually what the Islamic finance and economy people from the very beginning try to do, right? It is not just about profit. It is also other considerations, some non-price, some non-measurable, relatively or certain things not necessarily in the market was the concern for Islamic finance. Right now, the sustainability discussions are all trying to do that. They are probably trying to identify some market measures for this, but still it's very difficult. So that's why we have to be proud, and we have to dig into the earlier work of Islamic finance and economy. And I believe sustainability people can also learn from this discussion. Now it is taking place the other way around. There's a sustainable discussion on what we should get as an Islamic finance and economic people, but we should be more self-confident there. Before you start dealing with the sustainable finance, sustainable economy, sustainable, actually we were trying to do this in 1970s. Cengiz Hoca was trying to do that, and earlier on, we should highlight that. So, this is also something that we should probably learn from the history and from what we have done. But in any case, the finance will not be any more finance. It will be more there will be much more emphasis on ethical, responsible finance, because all these technological changes are probably bringing more ethical questions. Even the discussion of who's human, sort of an argument. I mean, if you watch this Yuval Harari, that from an ontological perspective, for him, there is no difference between computers and human beings. Anyway, we are not very much different from a flower or something. But these are all ethical, philosophical questions. Probably we should be delved into more. This is the first part. This is just an argumentation that we should be more ready for, and we should develop some methodologies. And these methodologies will not be like developing a new solo growth model sort of thing. It will be different. It is how we approach to new topics. That's why the example that I gave about the cryptocurrencies, I believe, is a good one, that we should find some resemblance in the other markets or other disciplines to be able to predict the future. And this is, again, what people are doing in the ecological economics, or what they are doing in the evolutionary game theory while benefiting from the biological research. And in the second part, just from the Islamic finance perspective, we so far I will share some of my views about Islamic finance. Islamic finance used to be more history driven. I mean, we have something in the history, and then we can derive from the history, and then we can implement certain things to today. All these discussions about money, wakfs, and others are actually trying to learn from the past and then to implement it today, which is good, right? Because we have to learn about history, and then we have to drive certain results. But now, when the Muslims are too much history dependent, by saying, okay, we have everything in history, we have Ibn Sina, this and this becomes more of a tautology, right? One way or other, our kids are not believing in this anymore, right? We have to have, they are following Elon Musk more than the many of the Muslim scholars. So that's why we have to be ready, future readiness. Even I believe over time, even the historians, which try to explain why the Muslim world stay relatively backwards as compared to the Western world, or why we couldn't catch up, is probably it is related with the future readiness. We were not ready with our institutions and so on. That's why when there are shocks, when the shocks are introduced for different reasons, we didn't really, we couldn't stay resilient, let's say, with today's term. So that's why these concepts are becoming more and more important. Future readiness, agility, this sort of concept, resilience. So we need to use this, and then we have to be more future looking, and we have to be more, let's say, ready for the future. And that's why this age of global anxiety, for example, is also becoming more, much more prevalent. COVID-19 and so on. But my point is that as an Islamic finance, where are we in this literature? We shouldn't be just dealing with, this is another mistake, unfortunately, we do ourselves, especially in Malaysia, Indonesia, sort of countries, that it is as if the Islamic finance is just about the Islamic social finance. It is about the zakat collection. But this is limiting the Islamic finance to the very narrow fields. And then we are marginalizing ourselves. As Muslims, we should say that, okay, as an Islamic scholar, as an economist, as a Muslim economist, I will be able to say something about the technology. I will be able to say something about the fintech. I will be able to say something about the CBDCs, which, or the minimum global wage, this sort of things. Otherwise, we can just deal with our own topics and we will be irrelevant. And this is another challenge, by the way. Imagine with the AI, with this futuristic movies. Probably I watch it too much in recent times. That might be reason. But even in the wars, the people who do not have the technology are not really needed. Right? The one thing we were against globalization in 1990s because of our Islamist tendencies, that we should be against everything. Thanks to our professors, that's what they taught us. But right now, even the wars are done by the robots, and it will be increasingly more, right? Even the drones are like that, right?
Even nanobots, huh?
Even
Nanobots.
Even non-robots.
Nanobots.
None?
Nanobots.
Okay, I don't know that. Hocam, mashallah, you follow the literature. But in any case, imagine like now in Bangladesh, there is an uprising. And Bangladesh was one way or other relatively better off with globalization because there is a huge labor force. And then they were integrated to the global textile production. And it was a form of integrating to the world. My concern is that with this Industry 4.0, with robotization, they will need the global economy will be less in need of the less skilled labor, because this less skilled labor is anyway is replaced more by the robots, especially by the robots, not automation necessarily, because automation is for the mundane jobs. But the robots are not necessarily doing mundane jobs. They will be even taking care of the elderly in Japan. The Japanese are investing a lot on robots for that. But what will happen to the people who are relatively poor and with their bare labor force they used to be incorporated? Are they going to be irrelevant? Are they gonna
produce robots?
They will
They will produce
robots to replace them. And then unfortunately the Muslim world is relatively poor and we will be more affected. So we have to be one way or another discussing this. Probably we should be even more concerned about these things. Certainly, one thing that probably we shouldn't be concerned too much about the future. Allah is giving everything, so we have to be accepting whatever happens. But at the same time, especially with this global international conditions and so on. Good to be happy with what we have, but at the same time, still I believe that it's better to be ready for the future, for the resilience, for the survival related reasons. And I believe that we have some good things there. And the example I gave about sustainable finance is important because right now, one of the major crises about the ontological crisis about the meaning. Economics through ecological economics, through sustainable is actually kind of trying to find a meaning, right? If it is not just about profit, if we have some ethical normative considerations, what it is. Or even when we consume, right? I mean, when you look at most of the ecological economics people are more ideologically motivated probably, but let's say this, even the sustainable finance people, when we consume something, when it is more sustainable, we are not doing it necessarily for the world. I believe we are doing it for ourselves also. Because when all the other ideologies are relatively weakened, we have a global ideology of sustainability. When you consume more sustainable products, you became part of the global community. And the Muslims have relatively less concern about this because from the very beginning, we know this multi-faceted world anyway. We were not just reducing everything to the consumption to begin with, right? That's why in Islamic finance and economics, we have a lot to learn from the early generation, from the first generation Islamic economists. But now conventional finance is trying to do this. So Islamic finance and economy in that sense is not necessarily in search of meaning, but Islamic finance and economy is still in search of direction. Why Islamic finance and economy is in search of direction? Because Islamic finance, Islamic economics is not necessarily bottom-up driven. It was a political process. I mean, when you look at the establishment of IDB or OIC, it was a very political process. The policymakers first said, okay, we are Muslims, we can rule the world with the Islamic principle in the political sense and also in economics and finance, right? So first, when you look at Malaysia, for example, okay, people are religious and so on, there's no doubt about it, but in terms of regulation, it was from the top-down approach was there. In Turkey, it is not necessarily so, probably. Not.
We politicized even NAS for financial.
But just in words. Oh, that's why in Turkey it is still in between. But in many of the countries, in Pakistan, in Malaysia, even in Indonesia, there is a big in Saudi Arabia and so on. There's a big top-down approach. But this is problematic. Why? Because in the top-down approach, you just regulate the banking industry. You change the regulations. You give some favor to the Islamic banks, Islamic financial institutions, and you will be fine. And this is exactly what happens in Malaysia, right? One way or other. And also, it is not necessarily for Islamically related motivations. I mean, the rich was the Chinese, and then by pushing the Islamic finance, you are actually generating your own entrepreneurs. Even in Indonesia, I mean, many of the products are putting this halal brands, and it's much more widespread in Indonesia. I was in that about 2 weeks ago, and it's a way of even establishing a kind of a local Muslim entrepreneurial class. So it's not necessarily completely with Islamic motivations, right? So. But right now, because of these technological changes, everything are becoming much more individualistic, right? In fintech, instead of I put my money to an Islamic bank, I can put my money to one of the Islamic wealth tech management company, and I don't have to put it in here. I can put it in London, and then this wealth tech management company can invest in different countries. So we will come. Okay, inshallah, I will. How much time? Okay, I will try to finish up in 5 minutes, and then we can.
You have time?
No,
You
it's
can
okay.
continue.
No,
But
it's
you
okay.
said you have the other.
I can leave at 3:15. I will
Okay,
pick
then.
up my
Okay.
kids from the school, so that's why. So that's why also in Islamic finance we need a different approach, and the fintechs could be a good solution because right now, and also this top-down approach is very much state-based approach. And you have one way or other, you control the states, you give some sort of a favor to Islamic banks and then the Islamic banks, Islamic financial issues are growing. But right now, one challenge is that many of the Muslims are not necessarily living in Muslim majority countries, like in India, right? There are more Muslims than Turkey, than many of the other, from more Muslims than in India, I guess. There are more Muslims living in India than Indonesia, which is the largest Muslim country. But still, we can cater the needs of these Muslims in India through these wealth tech companies, through even some cryptocurrencies and so on. Or there are relatively secular countries, and then people have different degrees of religiosity, let's say, and then we need to also cater the needs. So we have to also, this is good, and my point is that we need to also change the way how we approach the Islamic finance. There has to be more solutions for the individuals, not necessarily changing the overall regulations in the financial sector, because people right now can find other solutions without the need of the governments to favor the Islamic. Still, it helps. Like in Turkey, I believe there is still room to help the Islamic finance to grow. Probably we have, but in Malaysia, for example, more individual awareness and finding solutions to the individual needs are becoming much more important, because they already reach about 43% of the overall financial sector. So from there, individuals have to be much more aware, and the Islamic finance people, Sharia scholars, should help to find solutions. And that technology helps this, because Islamic finance is one where there is costlier. Why? Because there are more transaction costs. But right now, the technology is reducing this. Imagine, for example, Ethereum. Ethereum is not necessarily money, right? It's a contract, an embedded sort of money and the contract. And right now, many of the products can be written within Ethereum sort of cryptocurrencies, and it will reduce. And even there are some Sharia tokens, like you get a fatwa, and if you get this token, even there is kind of a tokenization of Sharia procedures. And there are some companies in Malaysia. So we can all benefit from this, but this is, again, individuals will be much more aware. There will be more Islamic crowdfunding companies for peer-to-peer lending and so on. That's why I believe that the fintech is also a good way for the Islamic finance to grow. So in the remaining time, let me, I got this concept from Professor Recep Şentürk, and he has an argument that we can move from the Muhammadiya to Ademiya, which is the Islam, and we have been saying this for a while, but probably he put it much better, that Islamic finance is not just for Muslims. Islamic finance for all the humanity, and we should keep this in mind. And that's why in our approaches and so on, we have to be much more universal, and because we believe that Islamic finance will be also helpful for the global economy, but probably it may take more time. And the last part, as I promised, is about the one thing that I observe also in Islamic finance. Most of the Islamic finance people are very pessimist people. This is a bad thing. I mean, we have to be hopeful about the future. We discuss about the future, but if we are pessimistic about the future, this is not good. We are not giving any hope to the younger generation. We say, okay, there is a convergence. Islamic finance become like a conventional finance. The sukuk has an issue. This could be all right, but at the same time, we have to be also giving hope to the people, or always in life anyway. The half of the glass is empty and half of it is full. Let's make it half empty. So, but we need to see the positive side of it, and I believe that in the Muslim world, if there is something good happening in the last 50 years, it is about Islamic finance.
True. People need more hope, or people need more profit share from Islamic banks? Which one?
Both are relatively related, hocam. But hope is first, because without the hope, we cannot survive anyway. And we need this in Islamic finance, because I feel like in Islamic finance conferences, our people are too much pessimistic. We criticize everything. We are too deconstructive. It's as if everything is wrong, and we are always fighting with the words. But we should see life is beautiful, one way or other. Alhamdulillah. Allah has created the life with. We should see that. This is also an important point, I believe, because over the last 50 years, when you look at even the discussions about the Islamic State, the political side, the cultural side, we don't have really a big consensus that we have achieved this, right? Even the success in the political side is not necessarily a success; it becomes kind of a failure by itself. But in culture, I mean, how many, let's say, artists we have globally know? I mean, you can say that we are not defining the market, and the market is defined by them. You can all discuss this, but one way or another, in the last 50 years, out of almost nothing, now we have Islamic banks. One way or another, as Muslims, our needs are very much catered. We have still room for improvement. Thanks to our Sharia scholars, inshallah, they have IOF and other things. But I believe there will be much more improvement on this for sure, because it's an ongoing thing. I mean, in the global history, when you look at Islamic finance, 50 years is nothing. It's still, I mean, we don't have MÜİSEF for 10 years, right? In the academia, in practice, it's still in most of the countries, Islamic finance is growing with double-digit numbers, and it is oftentimes doubling the growth of the conventional side. These are all good developments, and also it is a way of the Muslims to integrate with the rest of the world, because we cannot live in vacuum. I mean, this is how it depends how you approach it, but I'm more of a universalist Muslim, thanks to the shared tradition. So what we have done, we asked some of the major questions in cultural side, political side, and in economics. And we asked whether there is a consensus or not over time. And we asked this to ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is kind of a common wisdom. It's like the medium voter in economics, or the median person. You know, for economics, most of the models are done for the average person. And I believe ChatGPT is giving a kind of a common sense. The common sense could be represented with the ChatGPT. You may disagree with this, because this is also kind of a...
ChatGPT sometimes turns into cheap GPT.
Yeah, it is. But this is also another approach to benefit from ChatGPT, because, you know, there is higher in common sense, one way or another. What was it? Ümmetimin... The common sense is kind of, we don't know the common sense, right? But the common sense probably is could be represented. I'm not saying that because we don't know the sources, we don't know where they are getting the data, but we know that ChatGPT has much more knowledge in terms of data, in terms of books and everything. There are lots of ethical issues, by the way. We don't know where they are getting the data, what is the data source and so on, but we can look at the outcome. And we asked some questions to the ChatGPT. And then what we found out is that really, this is how we were expecting. And then there are more discussions that my student, thanks to him, he prepared us. Islamic finance is the winner, as compared to other discussions, like about the Islamic politics or Islamic culture-related questions. There seems to be much more consensus on this. And over time, Muslims seem to be much more agreeing on the financial issues than on the cultural and political issues, which might be expected ex ante anyway, but still it is good to show it through the ChatGPT. And then these are some of the dimensions we look, but I don't have time. So let me stop here. But in any case, let's be hopeful. Future is waiting for you.
Islamic finance is born winner.
Born winner.
Because it's Islamic.
Very good, very good. Without having tautology. But the good thing is that at least conventional finance is approaching to us. This is our problem with the Islamic finance people. They are saying that we are converging to conventional finance. I claim the other way. I mean, conventional finance is approaching us. All this sustainability discussion are actually putting some non-price determinants to the finance. And this is actually what Islamic finance people have been, Islamic finance and economic people have been trying to do from the very beginning.
Okay. Okay. We thank Dr. Ahmet Faruk Aysan for his fruitful presentation. Actually, I learned a lot from this presentation. Maybe the topic is close to my business background, because I was CEO of the Sakarya Incubation Center more than 4 years, and I work with this fintech company guys long time. I can say like from this presentation, two things is important. First, technology. We have to develop the technology. Unfortunately, there is a Muslim country or the Muslim people. We use the technology, but we don't develop the technology. This is the main problem. And how this technology is very important for the in finance. I can give you an example. One of the defense company, this company produced the algorithm for the defense industry. They use this algorithm buy and sell contract for the buy and sell contract. And this buy and sell on this algorithm beat all the other contract, and you can make the real like good money in the short time. There's algorithm buy and sell, and you use they developed this algorithm for the defense industry. Basically, like the missile get they change the direction of the missile. They use this algorithm, and they use this algorithm also in finance. And this algorithm was very successful, and you can make the money. If you cannot compete this in terms of this fintech with the conventional finance, I mean, you cannot be successful. First, alhamdulillah, in Islamic fintechs, we have some good steps. Maybe I can make some advertisement like architect company, you know, the architect from the Kuwait Turks. I mean, they produced or they developed the fintech and they exported. This is good for the Turkey. Also, the second important is here, the one of the point. We look at the history and we put the history, we put the program and we stop here. Okay, we have to get the lesson from the history and we have to produce some solution or the new product. As a Muslim scholar, most like we put all this history, like in Ottoman, we have this kind of the application. This is okay. How we are going to apply this application for this in future? So here is the we have the program. Dr. Ahmet Faruk Aysan put this two program, and this is good. Also here, the new researcher, there is good topics here. For example, central bank digital currency, it will be a hot topic in the future, even if right now. So this can be a good topic for you for the master or PhD dissertation. Now we can open the floor for the question. The people who follow us from the YouTube, they can write their question, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, you can write your question. Then first we can get you one or two questions.
Thank you.
Şöyle verelim.
First of all,
Hoca from Medeniyet University inşallah.
thank you very much. First of all, we thank Ahmet Hoca for being here for this fruitful conference. Actually, rather than a question, I have a remark regarding this issue. We should be hopeful because I'm following the pension fund system, important part of Islamic finance. We are talking about especially profit share system and banks, but we should be hopeful and we should be aware of the fact that there are some Islamic capital system which is developing itself very at a very big, huge speed. In Turkey especially, there's an example for this katılım emeklilik. You know, there are pension funds, Islamic pension funds. There's a new industry for Turkey for conventional and the Islamic part. We see that a small company growing and passing most of the conventional companies because there's a huge demand from the people, from participants for Islamic pension funds because we have a simple reason. People in Turkey are happy with the returns of Islamic pension funds. We have very much diversified products, Islamic products, and it's growing. The asset under management of the Islamic pension fund is growing at a very huge speed. So it is, as Ahmet Hocam said, we have enough reason to be very hopeful. Not for the profit-sharing banking katılım banking system, but also for the Islamic pension funds. Just I want to share this. Thank you very much.
I just to use the time efficiency, we can get the short and clear question. So
But by the way, I forgot one thing. For another example for the future related or the one of the thing probably that we should all try to do is we shouldn't secularize ourselves. If we just deal with the zakat, charity-related things, and then we say, okay, this is Islamic finance, as I mentioned, we are marginalizing ourselves. That's why my approach in my research also, I try to work on different topics. For example, I work on CBDCs. There's an art market, for example, even the one or the how the even the artwork can be used like money. Even the cryptos are helping us to understand the nature of money. Another research, for example, we have done about the future research is this metaverse. It is published in the Journal of Technology Forecasting. It's a relatively good journal. How we start, especially for our master and PhD students, probably it might be helpful. And all of our kids are playing with the Minecraft sort of computer games. But in the Minecraft, there is nothing Islamic, right? I mean, you can have, it's kind of a metaverse. There's a token being traded. And with one of my students, we said how we can make it more Islamic. Probably when people are, the kids are playing with Minecraft, there could be a mosque, there could be some azan recitation. So it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be playing, but at least we have to give some behavioral nudges to at least to make our kids to think about it and then to remind them. Even this is part of Islamic finance. And then, mashallah, she has published in good places. And Jamal is one of our best students, for example, in that area. So my suggestion is that don't work on a very conventional topics because the world needs you. Let's say.
Okay.
Please. If you can identify yourself, probably it will
Okay,
be.
okay. My name is Ilyas Abdullah.
Yes.
I'm a graduate of this institute, and currently I'm doing my PhD studies in Islamic finance at Istanbul University. Actually, thank you very much for this wonderful lecture. My question has to do with cryptocurrencies, especially regards to fiat money. We all understand that the fiat money has a problem because the central banks do have the authority to print money either digitally or physically, creating problems for the economy. And here is the case. Recently, we saw that some Islamic finance scholars proposed alternative use of currencies, the dinarist and then the gold system, just that it couldn't materialize. But the emergence of cryptocurrencies, should we say it is actually in to solve this problem? Or if not, is there any alternative solution to this problem of fiat money? This is just my question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's why actually we started working on cryptocurrencies back in 2017. We had a cryptocurrency blockchain group. We had some people from the law department, from finance, from computer science, and we used to meet each and every week. And it was not that academic at that time. These topics were not considered to be very academic. But right now there are lots of blockchain and cryptocurrency related papers, journals are even coming up. And the reason why we want to deal with this is that if you just discuss about the nature of money, this becomes more of a theoretical discussion, whether the fiat money is allowed in Islam or not. And one of the early scholars on this is Abdülkadir El-Sufi, Ian Dallas. I don't know, you guys probably will not remember, but it was in 1990s. In 1997, he came to Istanbul. Tayyip Erdogan was the mayor of Istanbul, and after he became the mayor, this intellectual side was probably more prominent, where Islamic scholars have been invited from throughout the world. I mean, Gannouchi, probably many people came, and Abdülkadir El-Sufi was one of them, and he came up with the gold dinar idea. Where and the Erbakan Hoca showed us, and then it was a big discussion. You remember? It was our undergrad years, and it was quite a vivid discussion. And we have been discussing this nature of money and for many years. And then fiat money is, yes, there are problems. But this is not just our problem. If you look at the Republicans in US, many of the Republicans are saying that we should close down the Federal Reserve. Because really, money creation has a big redistributive power. The money has 4 functions. 3 of them are very much accepted by everyone. They're like unit of account, exchange, and the store of value. But these are anyway pretty much accepted. But the 4th one has the problem, which the money is used to stimulate the economy. When there is a recession, you print more money, a very typical central bank story. But the central bank can do injustice during this process. even though they claim that they are saving the world, and I believe they saved the world in 2008 crisis. I'm a former central banker, but I'm against central banking. I'm more liberal in that sense, really, because this tool can be used in the wrong hands, let's say, and it could be also harmful to the economy. And we have all these experiences in Turkey, pretty much, unfortunately. The central banks can print too much money, it can be too much politically driven, and so on. These are the issues. And that's why at that time, Abdülkadir Sufi came up with the gold dinar. And the gold dinar was a product of that time also, because at that time, many of the conventional economists were discussing about the constitutional economics. We should put the money growth rate into the constitution such that the governments will not be able to change this, like what Argentina is trying to do right now. Argentina is trying to have a currency board, so they dollarize their currency because they have inflation rate about 80%, and then they know that they cannot do it through their central bank, so they try to establish a commitment mechanism by dollarizing their economy, or having an official dollarization where it's called currency board, and that's it. But cryptocurrencies are somewhat doing it as well. When you look at, especially, there are lots of cryptocurrencies, and when we ask our Sharia scholars, I mean, from their views also changing. For example, all of them has to have a different Sharia opinion, because all of them are not halal and all of them are not haram, I believe. And the Bitcoin is the most prominent one, and there is a huge literature right now about the Bitcoin. And one of the advantage of the Bitcoin is like constitutional economics. There's a limited supply, and an individual like a central banker, a central bank governor, or the central bank board is not deciding. Instead, all the miners have to come together to print. But even for them, there is a constitution that they cannot print more than certain number of Bitcoin. So in that sense, my opinion is that it could be even much more Islamic than the fiat currency. And this discussions about the cryptocurrency, but we don't just stay there. The central banks are reacting. They also start producing their CBDCs. But their CBDCs, from a more liberal perspective, is more problematic. I agree with the Republicans. I mean, this is a big weapon of mass destruction. All of a sudden, imagine central banks will know when you spend your money, whether you are spending your money for education, for foods. This could be used for positively, like there is a redistribution. And we are writing now a new paper on helicopter money versus missile money, where the helicopter money, it came up after 2008 crisis, after COVID-19. You just distribute money to stimulate the economy, because you need to give money to boost the economy. This is the fourth function of the money. But this is a very gross way of doing redistribution, like the banking that we do right now. But if you just give a targeted transfer, like you give the money only to the SMEs, you only give it to the poor, they have more propensity to consume, and they are more likely to, with a relatively much less funding, you can boost the economy much faster. CBDCs might help in that regard, because everything will be recorded. We will know who is rich, who is poor, because everything will be recorded. And then but at the same time, this could be quite harmful. The state, the government may say, okay, this guy Ilyas has a problem, I don't let the Ilyas to use any CBDCs. And then we start observing this, right? Globally, through sanctions, and even individually. I mean, some of the people are blacklisted, and they cannot even have credit cards. And then imagine when all the countries have CBDCs, those people will not have even the chance to live. So that's why we have to be aware of these discussions, these technological changes. I believe it is even more than the fiat currency right now that we are discussing. I mean, fiat currencies have some advantages, some disadvantages, but I am also very quite positive there, because in the past the discussion was just about whether we need to have good central bankers. Right now, we have to have good central bankers, because the technology will replace anyway. Like in CBDC discussions, if you don't have a good financial stability, macro stability, financial stability tools, people will anyway substitute your money with other currencies, and then you will not have any control on this. Right now, in the regular financial system, you have a control. At least they have to convert it into dollars and other things. But then in the CBDC's case, and I believe the CBDCs and the cryptocurrencies will coexist, this substitution will be much faster. And there is one good example on this, and it will increase the bank runs if you don't do it properly. Silicon Valley Bank, right? Silicon Valley Bank was a digital bank. In just half an hour, they lost about $45 billion in half an hour. This is a big bank run. And this is not because of, this is because of technology, because they are anyway digital. In just one click in your application, you transfer your money to the other bank. That's it. And then they cannot do anything. So that's why we have to be ready, future ready in that regard, because financial landscape is completely changing.
May I ask you
one more question?
Follow-up question.
Okay, last question.
We can go up to 3:15, I believe. Yes,
Yeah.
we have about 9 minutes if you like. If you, it's okay for you.
If you have time, you have time.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Hocam.
Actually, some new literature stress especially the point that fiat currency or fiat money, whatever you call it, is about 3%.
Yes,
And the rest is deposit money or bank money.
exactly.
Well, whether you are against or for central banks, but the banks create money. Just opening credit accounts, that's all. As for cryptocurrency or digital currency or whatever it's called, well, is it not, this is my question, is it not a kind of legal counterfeiting?
It is not.
I mean, they also
I mean, it is
create
not-
money, individuals.
Yeah, but Hocam, from the very first part, this is another thing that we observed in Islamic finance, and I started like that when Abdülkadir Sufi came to Turkey. He took us to Inverness, and then we discussed about Islamic finance and so on. And the main approach is that, okay, this fractional reserve system has a problem. Only very little fraction is used cash, the others are in all in accounts, and it's called insight money, where people put their money to the banks.
Talking about fractional reserve system, it is back in the history.
Yeah.
This is something new. I mean, this literature is new.
But this is kind of fractional reserve system, because when you have you put, let's say, 5 Turkish lira to the bank, and this 5 Turkish lira is given to another person, and the other person spend this, and then the person get this money again, put it to the bank, and then the bank again give it. So there's this sort of multiplier effect. So even though there's 5 and then it is multiplied, so this is actually similar in that regard. And many of the Islamic scholars start saying, okay, there's a problem with the fraction system. First, this is not a new discussion. This is very much done by the libertarians, especially because we are giving power to the banks.
Yes.
Do we really want to give this power? In the past, I was against. I was saying that we shouldn't give that much of power. But later, when I became a central banker, I realized that actually we are not giving that much power. Actually, everything, the financial banking sector is the most regulated sector in the world. And you can play with the reserve option mechanisms. You can play with the reserve
regulations are for their own benefit, actually. I mean, it's some of them.
It might be, yeah, that's right. That's why when the first Americans have established their Federal Reserve, they just maintain it for 16 years or so, and then they close because they don't want to give such a power to the banks, because the banks may capture the politicians, and then it goes like that. This might be the case for sure, but we don't know whether the banks are capturing the politicians or politicians are capturing the banks. It depends on the power struggle. For me, for example, in the last couple of years, banks were not necessarily capturing the politics. Politics actually were imposing their conditions. So for example, banks in Turkey are not very profitable in line with the inflation, at least for a while. So banks very much pressured. So that's why it's not always the banks are capturing the state, or sometimes when the governments are strong, they're actually pressuring the banks. So it depends on the power struggle. But the argument is that over the long term, the financial sector might capture the overall system, like a state capture might be done by the financial sector. It might be correct, right? Even right now, right? Most of the but I believe it is not done through the banks. It is done from the big wealth management companies. I mean, if you look at some of the midlife, right? The insurance companies, global insurance companies, they are running $1 trillion of worth of assets, and then they are investing in different countries. Even our very own companies are owned fractionally by them. This is even a bigger problem, I believe. But the fractional reserve system, I believe, or the one that you described, like I believe it's not really a big problem, because this is you have the capacity. This is the one thing about the central bank. If you do the right regulations, more just regulation for the financial stability and price stability reasons, it will be good for the society. And these banks will not necessarily capture a big profit, because when we look at the bank's profit, everything is recorded anyway. In Turkey, without the inflation, the bank's profit were about 12%, 18%, 15%. And if you invest in the real estate, you will get better returns. So the banking per se is not necessarily a very profitable business, which is because of the too much abundance of capital. And the banks is an intermediary, and they used to be benefiting from the asymmetric information. Because of this technological change, because there's much more or much less information asymmetry right now, because many things are recorded, the banks are actually losing in this process. Banks are not necessarily capturing. I believe they are even losing in the meantime. And when it comes to the cryptocurrencies, by the way, cryptocurrency people say the same thing, by the way. When the Satoshi Nakamoto said, okay, the central banks at the end are not for people. They first save the banks, and then they save the people. This Main Street, Wall Street discussion. It's a big debate, I believe. And you know, the police in New York has aggressively really attacked this Main Street people when they were protesting about the Wall Street, when the Fed at the end saved the banks. Really, only one bank has collapsed and others have merged. By the way, always don't be the first bank, because oftentimes regulators sacrifice one bank and then save the other banks. This is the tradition. So like the Demirbank case in Turkey, it was like that. After Demirbank, some of the banks have been saved. So in banking, the first rule is not to be the first bank to fail in the crisis. If you are the second, you are fine. But don't be the first bank. Anyway, the central bank will save you if you are the second bank. This is the rule.
They say too big to fail.
Too big to fail, exactly. Too big to fail, exactly.
So even if we are the first, if we are too big,
they don't let you down. Yes, exactly. And in that sense, but this all shows that the central banks, the regulators, are very effective. I mean, even in this discussion. So this cryptocurrency people are saying that, I mean, this is the idea of Satoshi Nakamoto. I mean, these people at the end, they are strong, but they will not save the people. So let's not trust these policymakers. Let's trust the technology. Let's trust the more democratized miners. We don't know whether it is democratic or not, because we don't know the number of miners, but certainly it is not one individual or a group of or the board members of the central bank. There are lots of miners, and in order to change something in most of the cryptocurrencies, they have to have a consensus, and it's very difficult to find the consensus. So this cryptocurrencies, in that sense, is closer to the constitutional economics. It is more committed, and in that sense, it could be even more Islamic. By the way, with Süleyman Hoca, we attended one seminar back in 2018, I guess. At that time, our Islamic scholars were thinking that Bitcoin is not halal. Now, I guess it is in between. I'm not still sure. So there are different opinions.
so
But from some respect, Bitcoin is much more Islamic than.
they now have a clear-cut definition of money.
No need to have definition, Hocam.
Functionality
Functionality is more important. But in that sense, I mean, there are some fake, illegal and so on cryptocurrencies for sure. I mean, this meme coins especially. A name became popular, and then all of a sudden people produce tokens, and then they make money. And these are not halal for sure, and because this is completely fake, and it is not really producing anything. But for Bitcoin, for Ethereum, for the first, let's say, 10 cryptocurrencies, they cater certain needs. And as long as they cater certain needs, I believe it will be much more Islamic, much more practical. Another thing is that also the economy will not run through the money. For many years also we were against financialization, right? Not because of our own production, because some leftist guy criticized the financialization of the capitalism, like gazino capitalism by Susan Strange. What was her name? So there was a big Susan. So there was this discussion, and we borrow from that literature, and we said in Islam there is also too much financialization. But right now, the tokenization is actually making financialization even more. But it is at the same time more Islamic. For example, the future, another thing about the future, I believe, will be through the tokenization. Even the services will be tokenized. One good example for some Turkish Airlines. Turkish Airlines, in order to get financing, instead of going to the banks, Turkish Airlines will say that, okay, I'm selling my tickets in advance, and I will give you token, and you can fly from Istanbul to Ankara with this token regardless of the time. This is doable, and then they can raise funds in advance instead of going to the banks. Or even in the sector, in other sectors, like in hotels, we write one hotel NFT paper, non-fungible token paper, or the token sort of paper. Same thing. Whenever you need funding, right now, people go to the financial markets to borrow. But in the future, probably they will issue tokens. And these tokens, as long as there's a secondary market for these tokens, the economy overall will be very much financialized.
So it
And
will
this
be
is not necessarily bad.
We
As we thought of
We
it.
can say the sukuk is our tokenism.
Sukuk will be tokenized, let's say.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So it will not boost the emission?
For the Bitcoin, yes, I mean the energy is there, but many of the AI microchips are actually consuming more energy than the
No. I'm
cryptocurrency.
talking of bursting the emission of money.
No, everything, commodity and the money will be same. Services.
How?
Because as a company, I'm selling this, and there's a secondary market, and then people can buy the services in advance. Well, this is a good question, Hocam, but the money will not be one money. Everything will be money. That's why I'm saying it will be complete financialization. Everything will be sold in advance, and then there will be a secondary market. This is kind of an extreme thing, but increasingly more this will happen. But there is no single currency. Instead, even now we don't have single currency. We have Turkish lira, dollar, and so on. On top of this national currencies, we will have also commodities. Or the best example is that big corporations will have their own money, let's say. Elon Musk has his money because he's a reputable person. Zuckerberg, actually, he tried. He came up with the Libra idea. Libra was like a cryptocurrency, actually. And the US government was very fearful of Zuckerberg in that sense, because really his company has a huge value, and he is probably more reputable than many of the states. Apple will have its own money, right? These are all money, yes, but the money will not be a single money. It will be, yes, burst of monies, yes, multiplicity of monies.
I guess we can finish here. Again, I would like to thanks. I guess we have to mention two things here. As if like all the people here, we study Islamic economic and finance, and we discussed this topic inside the Islamic economics and finance. Also, we have to discuss these topics with the guys who study conventional finance and economics, because maybe they have a different opinion. Sometimes, like, we have opinion and we discuss in opinion inside us. Maybe we can discuss, maybe they can help us. Because sometimes, like, we can miss the point and they can have a different way. Because we have maybe like positive opinion. For example, like, if you look at the right now in the United States, in terms of the profit, if you look at the 10 company, in terms of the profit, 7 of them high-tech company, not the finance company. But if you look at the Turkey or the other Muslim country, the top 10 company in terms of the profit, like in Turkey, 8 of them is the bank. So if you look at the finance sector is in front of the develop more than the real sector, then there's a problem. This kind
No,
of
but they cannot evade taxes. That is the problem.
It's
not necessarily there.
Second, we have to look at the data. For example, like, okay, I'm a finance guy. I play with different stock market here. if you look at like the Islamic fund and the non-Islamic fund, if you check at the TEFAS, you know the TEFAS, in terms of the return, first 10 or even the first 20 fund, in terms of the return, none of them is the Islamic fund. Like he said, like participation, retired fund is, return is good. Yes, maybe it is good in terms of inflation, but you compare like the conventional fund, it's not good. Yes. So we have to compare, like we have to discuss this conventional finance, guys. We have to, in terms of the return or like the opinion, then we can develop those, the Islamic finance. The otherwise, we are looking to, we are in the good way, but in the which, how we are going to compare. If you compare the conventional, in terms of the return, I don't know. Or if you look at the development, still Islamic finance growth rate is the higher than the conventional finance, but the return or the like the Islamic finance increased by decreasing rate. You see, like in Turkey, the share of the Islamic finance is 9%, and it's stuck there. It's not increasing anymore. Yeah. Maybe here is the one of the good point the Dr. Ahmet Aparkaysan said. Like every time we said the Islam is not for the Muslim, for the all the people. The same for the Islamic finance. Islamic finance for all the people. But if we say this one, then return of the Islamic finance should be higher than the conventional finance. This is the only way you can increase the share of the Islamic finance. Okay, there's a risk factor, but I mean, the return should be the main determinant here. So for this, we have to develop the new product. Maybe risky, but return will be higher. We have to adjust to this one. And in the future, in the past, we have this kind of product. For example, right now is the like equity-based crowdfunding is there. Maybe one of the future product will be future product for Islamic finance, but we have to develop this one. Okay, I guess we can finish, and
Thank
we
you
are
very
going to give the gift to Dr. Ahmet.
Thank you.
Thank you, hocam.
Hocam, thank you. Good to see you. Hocam güzelmiş. Evet, hocam çok teşekkür ederim. Sağ olun. İnşallah şöyle. Yanlış mı oldu hocam?
Hayır hayır, aşağı doğru eğerseniz
Şöyle
üstteki gözüküyor.
Tamam. Ah, şöyle yapalım.
Tam vekaleten müdür olduğumuz için çok fazla
Estağfurullah.
hediye vermiyoruz.
Hocamın rektörlük tecrübesi var oralarda.
Estağfurullah.